He walked in barefoot, his hoodie soaked from the freezing Oregon rain, clutching a torn paper bag like it held his whole life. Eliot Walker was 9 years old, rail-thin, with hollow eyes that didn't blink when he looked straight at Officer Jenna Morales behind the front desk. "Please, arrest the man I call Dad." The entire station seemed to stop breathing. Outside, neon lights flickered over wet asphalt as a food truck across the street served its last customers. A homeless vet, wrapped in a tarp, coughed from the alleyway. Inside, the warmth didn't reach Jenna. Not after those words. She stood up slowly, instincts kicking in. Eliot didn't look lost. He looked done, like a kid who had carried something too heavy for too long and finally dropped it. "Son," she said gently, "can you tell me what happened?" Eliot didn't answer. He just pulled his hoodie tighter around himself and sat down quietly, rainwater dripping from his sleeves onto the tiled floor. Jenna's heart twisted. Her own boy was turning 10 next month. Something was very wrong, and she was about to find out just how deep this went. He didn't flinch when the officer offered him a blanket, didn't blink when asked his name again. He just sat there, soaking wet, arms wrapped around a crumpled brown paper bag like it was something sacred. Inside the bag were 2 slices of stale white bread, mashed flat from being hidden too long. A torn corner from a grocery flyer with the words "half off, no ID needed" barely legible. And a broken action figure, missing one leg, head barely hanging on. It wasn't survival gear. It was an escape plan. 2 weeks earlier, Eliot had stuffed that bag under his bed in the dead of night. Every night after, he practiced unlocking the front door without making a sound. He watched how Rick turned the deadbolt, memorized the click. He even timed the hallway creaks and how long it took the dog next door to stop barking. He didn't have a map, just the corner of that flyer. A sign from the supermarket 2 blocks away. He didn't know where he was going, just anywhere that wasn't home. Back at the station, Officer Jenna Morales glanced down at the contents of the bag and felt something cold knot in her chest. She'd seen a lot in 15 years, but something about that bag, how precisely it had been packed, how it looked more planned than panicked, bothered her. "Where's your mom, Eliot?" she asked gently. He looked up, eyes empty. "She's gone. She died. Car crash. When I was 5. Jenna paused. "And Rick? Rick is your dad?" There was a beat of silence. Eliot's lips moved before any sound came out. "That's what he says." There was no warmth in his voice, no tremble, just a quiet distance, like he'd already learned how to detach himself from people who were supposed to protect him. "Did you ever see a birth certificate?" Jenna asked casually. Eliot shrugged. "I never had one. Rick said it burned in the fire." Jenna jotted that down. A fire. No paperwork. A kid without a last name that matched anything in the system. The more she looked at Rick Walker's name, the more it buzzed in her head like a wrong note. A quiet knock interrupted her thoughts. Another officer had pulled Rick's old address history from DMV records. None of them matched Eliot's school enrollment. And oddly, none listed Eliot as a dependent. Jenna looked back at the boy sitting under the flickering fluorescent light, holding tight to that pathetic bag of scraps and hope. It wasn't the kind of thing a child packed because they were running away after a fight. It was the kind of thing they packed when they knew no one was coming to save them. "Eliot," she said, kneeling beside him, "can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest." He nodded slowly. "Did Rick ever say anything about taking you somewhere? About leaving?" Eliot's fingers tensed around the paper bag. His voice was barely audible. "Last week, I heard him on the phone. He said someone wanted to take me. He said they'd pay." Jenna's blood ran cold. She met eyes with another officer across the room, who immediately stepped out to make a call. Eliot looked down at his broken toy. "I don't think he's really my dad." And in that single quiet sentence, the cracks in Rick Walker's carefully built lie began to split wide open. "You get me the cash and the kid's yours. No questions, no paperwork." Eliot didn't mean to hear it. He was just thirsty. The hallway was cold, the carpet damp with winter air, and when he passed the cracked bedroom door, the voice stopped him like a punch to the gut. Rick was on a Zoom call, midnight. Lights off, curtains drawn. Only the pale blue glow of the screen lit his face, but Eliot could see enough. Two strangers stared back from the monitor, well-dressed, stiff smiles, thick accents. Ukrainian, he'd later learn. The woman clutched a folder. The man leaned forward, asking again about the price. Rick rubbed his hands together like he was selling a used car, not a child. "He's a good kid," Rick said. "Clean, American-born, healthy, doesn't ask questions." Eliot froze. The words didn't make sense at first. He blinked, holding his breath, his bare feet aching on the cold floor. But then Rick leaned closer to the webcam and whispered, 10,000. In cash. No bank transfers. We do this next week. Eliot's knees almost gave out. His stomach turned. He backed away, step by silent step, retreating to his room like he had seen a ghost. Except the ghost was real, and it had raised him. He didn't sleep that night. He didn't cry either. He opened the drawer beside his mattress, pulled out the old iPad Rick never remembered he owned, and pressed record the next night. He waited until the blue light glowed through the crack in the door again. Waited until Rick was back in his corner, whispering with the couple across the ocean. The second call was even worse. Rick complained about Eliot's school, how it made things complicated. He asked if they could fake transfer documents, suggested telling the agency Eliot was homeschooled. They laughed. Rick laughed with them. And then he said it. "I've had him long enough. It's time he moved on." Eliot turned the screen off and curled into a ball beneath his covers. That voice, so familiar, so final, carved a line in his heart that would never fully close. The next morning, Rick smiled like nothing had happened. He made toast, poured orange juice, and said, "Big changes are coming, champ." He ruffled Eliot's hair like he was proud of a decision Eliot hadn't made. Rick thought Eliot was too quiet to question, too small to notice, too broken to fight back. What Rick didn't know was that desperation makes kids sharper. It teaches them to see the cracks in smiles and the lies in silence. It makes them record things no child should ever need to prove. 2 days later, Rick borrowed Eliot's social security number to apply for a new payday loan, $6,200 from a faceless app with a 38% interest rate. The debt collectors were circling, the walls were closing in. Selling Eliot wasn't just cruel, it was a way out. But Eliot was done being silent. He copied the recording onto a flash drive and hid it in the heel of his sneaker. And the night he left, he didn't run in panic. He walked in purpose. Because somewhere in the city, a police officer would believe him. And someone else, a stranger with a warm accent and $10,000, was already planning his room. "I don't have it." It burned in the fire. Rick's voice cracked just enough to sound believable. He shifted in his seat at the station, eyes darting to the papers on the table, the forms he couldn't sign, the questions he couldn't answer. Officer Jenna Morales sat across from him, her expression calm, but her gut screamed otherwise. A fire. That was his excuse. The birth certificate, the guardianship papers, every legal tie to Eliot, gone in some mysterious blaze he never reported. "What about school records?" she asked, pen tapping lightly. Rick shrugged. "We move around a lot." "We?" He didn't reply. Back at her desk, Jenna ran Eliot's name through every state database she had access to. Oregon had nothing. No birth record, no school enrollment prior to the last 9 months, no immunization logs, no trace. Eliot Walker didn't legally exist. The deeper she searched, the colder her blood ran. She flagged a background check on Rick Walker. A petty theft arrest in 2015. Dismissed. No dependents listed. No tax records showing a child. Yet somehow he'd enrolled Eliot in a public school and claimed medical benefits under his name. It didn't add up. She called in a detective in Iowa, Des Moines, the place Rick listed as his hometown. 2 days later, a local investigator knocked on the door of a weathered duplex in the south side of town. The woman who answered had kind eyes and a memory like steel. A neighbor from back in 2017. She remembered the funeral, the couple who died in the car crash, and the little boy who stood silently between 2 caskets, holding a stuffed bear and staring at the floor. His name was Eliot, she said. Sweetest thing. His parents, Jacob and Lauren Walker, killed by a drunk driver. "Did he have family?" the investigator asked. She nodded. "One brother left, Rick, showed up right after the service, took the boy and just disappeared. Back in Portland, the pieces slammed together like broken glass, refitting into a jagged mosaic. Rick wasn't Eliot's father. He was his uncle, and he never filed for custody, never informed child welfare. He just took him. Officer Morales stared at the timeline. The funeral, the disappearance, the 6-year silence. Her pulse quickened. Jenna brought Eliot into a private interview room. She showed him a still frame from an old security cam, Rick's arm around him, leading him toward a rusty pickup in a church parking lot. "Do you remember this day?" she asked softly. Eliot's eyes welled. He nodded once. "That was the last day I saw my mom and dad." Jenna held her breath. Eliot reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was printed from a library computer. A screenshot from an online post. It read, "Looking for my nephew, Eliot Walker, age 4, last seen in Des Moines, Iowa. Please contact if you know anything." "Who posted this?" Jenna asked. "My real uncle," Eliot whispered. "He lives in Florida. I found it last year, but I didn't know what to do." And just like that, the truth wasn't just hidden. It had been buried beneath silence, lies, and a stolen identity. What Jenna didn't know yet was that the man in Florida had never stopped searching, and he was about to find out that his nephew was still alive. "You fed me. You lied to me. You almost sold me." The words didn't shake when Eliot said them. They landed in the silent courtroom like glass shattering on marble, sharp, final, and impossible to ignore. Rick flinched. He hadn't looked up once since the hearing began. But now, under the sterile lights and the watchful eyes of the judge, he raised his head and saw the boy he used to call son staring straight through him. Eliot stood at the witness podium, barely tall enough to reach the mic, but his voice was clear. The room was quiet, suffocating. Even the soft shuffle of papers from the court clerk felt intrusive. "I didn't know who I was," Eliot continued, eyes locked on Rick. "You told me my parents were nobody, that no one wanted me, but they did, and you knew it." Rick's lip quivered. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally spoke. I thought I was giving you a chance, a better life." Eliot blinked once. "By selling me?" A collective murmur rippled through the back row. Rick's lawyer shifted in his seat and leaned toward the mic. "Your Honor, if I may, the defense would like to reframe." The judge held up a hand. Rick leaned forward, elbows on the defense table. "It wasn't like that. I wasn't going to hurt him. He looked down at his hands. "I was drowning. I had no money. I couldn't even afford food some weeks. That couple, they said they could give him a future." "You took my past," Eliot said quietly, "and you tried to sell my future." Rick broke. Tears spilled fast, uneven, not performative, just exhausted. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The defense attorney rose again. "Your Honor, we request leniency based on the defendant's mental health evaluation. He's been diagnosed with severe depressive disorder. He attempted suicide in 2021. This wasn't premeditated malice, it was desperation." Across the aisle, the prosecutor stood, calm and resolute. Desperation doesn't excuse fraud, kidnapping, and attempted human trafficking. The defendant accepted a $2,000 down payment into his PayPal account 2 weeks before the scheduled transfer. That's not a man looking for help. That's a man closing a deal. The judge listened, her face unreadable. She glanced at Eliot, then at Rick, crumpled, shaking. The court was split. Some whispered with pity, others stared with fury. And Eliot? He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just stood there, eyes older than his age, carrying the weight of a childhood stolen by someone who should have protected him. The judge called a recess. Eliot stepped down from the podium. As he walked past Rick's table, he paused, not out of fear, but closure. Rick looked up again, eyes pleading. Eliot said nothing. But when he reached the courtroom doors, he turned to Jenna Morales, waiting outside in uniform, and whispered something only she could hear. "I want to see the man from Florida, the one who never stopped looking." And with that, the next chapter of truth was ready to be written. He looked older than Eliot remembered, smaller somehow. Rick's frame had folded in on itself, shoulders rounded, voice quieter, eyes darker. He wasn't the towering shadow that haunted Eliot's sleep at 10. He was just a man now, just Rick. They met on a breezy Florida afternoon outside a community center where second chances lived between counseling sessions and job training flyers. Eliot came alone. No police escort, no lawyer hovering nearby. Just a boy who had outgrown the fear, but not the memory. Rick stood when he saw him, smiled like it hurt. "Eliot," he said. Eliot didn't respond right away. His hands stayed in his pockets. He let the silence hang long and full. Then calmly, "You can sit." Rick did. They talked for 10 minutes. Not about the past. Eliot didn't need the recap. Not about the future. Rick didn't dare ask. They talked about now, about how Eliot was in a magnet high school with a STEM scholarship, about how he wrote online for kids like him, kids who had to find out who they were by digging through lies. Rick nodded, said, "That's good," like it was enough. Eliot never called him Dad. Not once. When he stood to leave, Rick reached out, not to grab, just to make contact. His fingers hovered for a moment near Eliot's wrist. "I'm glad you're okay," he said. "I mean that." Eliot looked at the hand. He didn't flinch, but he didn't reach back. "I know," he said, "but I'm not okay because of you. I'm okay in spite of you." Rick blinked, nodded again, slower this time. There was no defense left in him, just gravity. Eliot walked away. Later that month, Eliot stood on a stage at his school's TEDx event. The auditorium was packed. His slide behind him read, "The Kid with No Name, Why Children Deserve the Truth." He didn't read from notes. He didn't need to. "I once trusted the wrong person," he told them, "but I never stopped believing in the right ones." He told them about silence and how heavy it is for a child to carry. About lies that dress up like love. About the people who helped him rebuild, not perfectly, not all at once, but enough to move forward. He ended with one sentence that lingered in the air long after the mic went quiet. "Your past doesn't get to own your future. You do." That night, he got over 200 messages from strangers. Some were from kids. Some from adults who had been kids like him. Once. And now, here's the part I whisper to you. Yes, you watching. Maybe you've carried something too long. Maybe there's a name you've stopped saying. A goodbye you never gave. A version of yourself you've been afraid to reclaim. It's okay if you're not ready to forgive. It's okay if you're not ready to speak. Don't let someone else's damage decide who you get to be. If Eliot's story meant something to you, even just one part of it, maybe leave a comment. Maybe hit that like button. Maybe subscribe. Not for us, but for the next time you need to remember you're not alone. This is Revenge Her Way, and sometimes the softest voice carries the loudest truth.